Welcome to today's legal discussion. If you are a bar examinee or a law student, this lecture will help you master the important concepts of the One-Person Corporation, OPC, under Republic Act No. 11,232, or the Revised Corporation Code of the Philippines. The OPC is a relatively new concept in Philippine corporate law, and understanding its structure, key features, and legal implications is important, not only for the bar exam but also for future legal practice. In this session, we will cover what an OPC is and why it was introduced, the essential features of an OPC, the rights and liabilities of the sole stockholder, the doctrine of piercing the corporate veil in an OPC, common issues and bar exam tips. Let's begin. Concept overview. What is a one-person corporation? One-person corporation equals a corporation with only one stockholder. Under the old corporation code, at least 5 incorporators were required to form a corporation. However, with the passage of the Revised Corporation Code in 2019, a one-person corporation, OPC, allows a single stockholder to establish a corporation. This structure was introduced to encourage entrepreneurship and simplify business registration while still offering the benefits of a corporation, such as limited liability. Legal basis. Section 116 of the Revised Corporation Code states that a natural person, trust, or estate may establish a one-person corporation. However, not everyone can form an OPC. Certain entities are prohibited from doing so, including 1. Banks and quasi-banks, 2. Insurance companies, 3. Pre-need companies, 4. Trust companies, 5. Public and publicly listed companies. Licensed professionals for their practice, e.g., lawyers, doctors, accountants, cannot form an OPC to practice their profession. Why are these restrictions in place? Primarily due to the need for public trust and regulatory oversight in these industries. For example, a doctor cannot form an OPC to conduct medical practice, but they can form an OPC for a medical supply business. 2. Key features. Now that we understand what an OPC is, let's examine its defining characteristics. 1. Single stockholder as sole director and president. 1. Unlike a regular corporation with a board of directors, an OPC is entirely controlled by a single stockholder, who also acts as the president and director. 2. However, this stockholder cannot be the corporate secretary, Sec. 121. 2. The role of a corporate secretary must be given to someone else. Example. Maria, a sole proprietor, converts her business into an OPC. She names herself as the president and director but appoints her trusted accountant as the corporate secretary. This complies with the legal requirement. 2. No minimum capital stock requirement. 1. Unlike some corporations, an OPC does not require a minimum authorized capital stock, except if a special law prescribes 1. Sec. 117. Example. Mark wants to form an OPC for his digital marketing business. Since no special law mandates a minimum capital for this type of business, Mark can incorporate his OPC even with a small initial investment. 3. Articles of Incorporation and Nominee Requirement. 1. The articles of incorporation of an OPC must include a nominee and alternate nominee. 2. This is important because, in the event of the death or incapacity of the stockholder, the nominee temporarily takes over management to ensure business continuity. Sec. 118. Example. Juan, the sole stockholder of his OPC, designates his brother Pedro as the nominee and his niece Ana as the alternate nominee. If Juan becomes incapacitated, Pedro will temporarily manage the OPC. This ensures a smooth transition of management. 4. No need for corporate bylaws. 1. Traditional corporations must adopt corporate bylaws to govern internal procedures. 1. However, OPCs are exempt from this requirement, Sec. 119, making governance much simpler. 5. Use of OPC in corporate name. 1. To distinguish it from other corporations, an OPC must include the letters OPC at the end of its corporate name, Sec. 120. Example. If Anna registers her consulting firm as an OPC, its official name must be Anna Consulting Services OPC. 3. Limited liability and piercing the corporate veil. Limited liability is not absolute. One of the biggest advantages of an OPC is limited liability, meaning the stockholder's personal assets are protected from the liabilities of the corporation. However, this protection is not absolute. Under Section 130, the doctrine of piercing the corporate veil still applies. Example scenario. Imagine Juan, an entrepreneur, registers an OPC for his business. However, he regularly withdraws company funds for his personal expenses, vacations, luxury shopping, even his mortgage payments. Later, his OPC incurs debts it cannot pay. Can creditors go after Juan's personal assets? Legal analysis. 1. The law states that a stockholder must maintain a clear distinction between personal assets and corporate assets. 2. Since Juan used corporate funds for personal expenses, this creates grounds for piercing the corporate veil. 3. As a result, creditors can hold him personally liable. Key takeaway. Always maintain a separate financial identity between the OPC and the stockholder. IV. Conversion and succession in an OPC. What happens if an OPC grows and more investors want to come in? The law allows an OPC to convert into an ordinary corporation if additional stockholders are introduced. On the other hand, what happens when the sole stockholder dies? The nominee listed in the Articles of Incorporation temporarily takes over until the legal heirs decide whether to 1. Continue the OPC. 2. Convert it into a traditional corporation. Keycap 3. Liquidate the business. This ensures business continuity and a clear process for succession. Example. If the sole stockholder of an OPC dies, the nominee takes over and consults the heirs. The heirs can either continue operating the OPC or convert it into a traditional corporation with shared ownership. Bar exam tips and common pitfalls. Before we conclude, here are some important bar exam tips when answering OPC-related questions. 1. Know the distinctions. Compare an OPC with traditional corporations and sole proprietorships. 2. Understand the legal doctrines. Pay special attention to limited liability and piercing the corporate veil. 3. Be ready for hypothetical scenarios. Questions may involve liability issues, nominee succession, or improper corporate governance. 4. Use IRAC in essays. Clearly structure your answers using issue, rule, analysis, and conclusion. Common mistakes to avoid. Crossmark assuming that an OPC always protects personal assets. Remember, corporate veil piercing applies. Crossmark forgetting that professionals cannot form an OPC for their practice. Crossmark overlooking repertorial requirements. An OPC still needs to submit annual reports and financial statements. And that concludes our discussion on the one-person corporation. Remember, the OPC is a powerful tool for entrepreneurs, but it must be managed responsibly and in compliance with the law. Mastering this topic is not just essential for the bar exam but also for future legal practice. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more legal insights. Subscribe for more bar exam mastery.